It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to focus on just two topics. We're going to talk about the UFC antitrust cases, specifically about that status conference, and then we're going to talk about the Senate hearing concerning the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act and everything that swirled around it, because that thing just wrapped up a couple of hours ago, and we are here, Johnny, on the spot, getting it out to you. But if you want access to all of the information we're getting ready to impart, you're going to need to pick up a paid subscription, because our OG listeners know that if you don't have a paid subscription, you don't listen to the whole show, because about half of it sits behind a paywall, because, you know, we got to keep the lights on around here. Now, John, how the heck are you? I know that you were really disappointed earlier. You were frustrated. Tell me.
Frustrated about the hearing, or about just that the fact that I bought some cereal that you recommended and it turned out to be colon blow.
Oh my goodness. Stop it. Magic Spoon, the Fruit Loop variety, is the best tasting cereal ever, and it doesn't get soggy in milk.
Look at that. We deserve to be a sponsor. They need sponsors. They need to sponsor a product, a show, I should say. That product should be calling us for the endorsement we're giving it right now.
It is so good. I'm so glad you tried it. I knew you would like it.
I mean, I've had Magic Spoon before, but just not that concoction of it. And I don't think my guts are ready for it.
Oh, my goodness. So, John, let's get down to brass tacks, because we had so much happen in the last, 48 hours. Let's talk first, like we always do, about the UFC antitrust cases, because there was a status hearing yesterday morning. Well, a status conference yesterday morning. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, I've been calling around trying to get some information. I was hoping yesterday to have Alessandro Gelke, who's a manager based in Vegas, to come on, because he attended. He actually went there to see what's going on. And I was hoping to have him on for a brief interview that we could have posted on the Substack. And I'll probably still have him on after this episode comes out. But yesterday, my internet was down. Thanks to Spectrum, we had an outage, and my internet was down basically the entire day. So I didn't get that recorded yesterday. So sometime later today or tomorrow, I will hopefully record some with him to go over in full detail what he witnessed, because he was there. But I have a lot of notes that I've written down that happened. And it seems like it was a pretty interesting, productive day in the court. One thing, though, that was not discussed at all was dominance MMA. I thought that would be something that would be discussed, that the judge may make some rulings on dominance about attorney fees or some of the other discovery issues, but that was not discussed at all. It was all basically about the spoliation issue with the UFC and the phones. And so the judge, I'm just going to go through my notes. Now, these might not be 100% accurate, because I am writing down what people are telling me. And so, again, hopefully if we have someone on that was there, they can give us the full details. But based on what I heard, calling around, the judge had an expert that was hired, and he wanted a contract signed at the end of the day, I guess, after the hearing. Apparently, they had found one of the missing phones. Dana White's missing phones, and this phone was missed. I think this was apparently too. This might have been the phone that Emmanuel's nephew stole, that they found, or they thought had stolen. So he's off the hook. But this missing phone was found because this is what I was told. I got to preference that. I don't know if this was. I find this kind of hard to believe, but it was missed apparently because it was in a black case on a black interior of a car, the black leather interior of a car, and they just missed it.
I don't buy it.
Yeah. So then they, I guess there was a question about how many phones Dana White has held. He didn't know, or they didn't know, the attorneys, I should say. Did they request carrier data? No, they did not. The court then ordered that White and Long request from all carriers all records for phone numbers they've used. And then he wanted that completed this week. I think this might be the third chance they've had to do this. So, and then they said, I think Long had done that on Horizon, but White had not. And so that was part of it. Then to continue with, the phone was the Emmanuel one that Emmanuel stole. And then apparently Boulware, it sounds like he read Latham, the attorney's, the Riot Act, that, politely, apparently, that's the notes I have here, politely read them the Riot Act, that never in his career has he seen a client flout discovery like Zuffa, and that he advised the attorneys to impart that message so it's understood to their client. So they set some future dates. On May 11th, the expert reports on the phones should come in. They are doing some analysis on the phone data. On May 18th, there will be, they want the experts to come in and testify. And so that's the majority of the things. I think it was just recently too, was April 2nd that they found the last phone, which makes them 7 phones now that they have. And that there were some questions concerning the delete settings that Long had. So that was the day. That was the majority of the stuff I got from the hearing. Now, again, I hope I'll speak to someone and we'll have someone on to go into see if we missed anything. But for the gist of it, to summarize, it sounds like the big takeaway is that the UFC lost a phone in a car, and I guess couldn't find it, and that the judge gave him a polite dressing down.
Seems like a whole lot of kerfuffle over nothing, really.
Yeah. Who can blame them for losing a phone like that? Now, the big question will be coming out what the experts find when they analyze these phones. So we will wait for that, because I imagine if these phones are full of data of all the missing material that they wanted, then the Zuffa is going to be off the hook. But if these phones come back and there's still massive amount of material missing, either because it looks like it was deleted or because that phone was not used during that time or whatever, then, I don't know how much longer this can get kicked down the road. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it seems like it's just constantly, every time they come back, they get another chance.
Well, and I mean, in some ways that might work to the judge's benefit, or I should say the plaintiffs and the judge's benefit, because if they try to appeal, they can demonstrate that they bent over backwards and gave them every opportunity possible.
Okay. All right. I guess I can deal with that. So what is next? What is the next thing that we should look forward to other than, just spur of the moment filings?
Well, the next big thing is what they announced here is that May 11th, the expert report is due on the phones. And then May 18th, we're going to have testimony. The experts are going to come in and there'll be a hearing for them to testify. And so we should get an idea of maybe what's going on with these phones, with the spoliation issue. And then we can, I guess we can start theorizing what the judge's response is going to be to those.
All right. Well, I look forward to May 11th and May 18th.
Now, I look forward to finding someone to be there for us, because that's the hard. I doubt I'll be able to take off for May 11th or May 18th, I should say, to attend. But hopefully we'll luck out again, and then we'll have someone there in the court, because God knows the Vegas media is not going to show up.
Well, I'm looking over at Alessandro Gelke, so we're going to have him get back in there for us. Well, now that we've got that all wrapped up, it's time for us to talk about the Senate hearing concerning the Revival Act, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. So, first question is, you watched the whole thing. What was your gut reaction after watching it?
Well, my gut reaction is that I have to say, I lean again. I always have leaned, I think, more than 50%, but I lean, I guess, more strongly in the direction that this will pass based on just this hearing. And the reason is, I thought both hearings have been unfair competition between the two sides. On the first hearing, it was stacked with 3-1 in the House, 3 supporters of the bill versus just Pat English. And Pat English, as great as he is a guy that's knowledgeable as he is, just did not have the best performance in front of a group speaking in defense of the current bill. And the new hearing, my gut reaction is that while some of the witnesses that opposed the new Ollie Act bill were very strong or presented strong arguments, it's still the unfair advantage when they have to deal with someone like Nick Khan, who's so skilled, so prepared, and so talented at speaking in these kind of settings, just off the cuff, just very used to from, I guess, his background, his career, and just years of dealing with interviews and such. He's just very good off the cuff like this. And it was an unfair advantage. And so you could see that the arguments that he had prepared, probably prepared in concert with some of the members of Senate, landed more. And it just became clear during the debate that even if you agreed with what the other witnesses were saying, Nico Ollie Walsh and Oscar De La Hoya, that the arguments sounded more persuasive. Even when you knew that they were wrong, they sounded more persuasive coming from Nick Khan.
What was your opinion of the senators' questions?
Well, this was kind of interesting, too, because this was different than the House debate, the House hearing that they had, because one is, I got to give Ted Cruz a lot of credit on this. He does a very good job of asking questions that seem very neutral. Now, it seems clear we know what side of this he falls on. He's the person that's been earmarked for a long time, that he's going to be the person to introduce the bill into the Senate, that he has allied himself with TKO to get this bill passed, probably on behalf of the Trump administration. So you know where his loyalties fall on this bill, where his opinion already is. But he does a very good job of presenting it as an open debate, which, I do not like Ted Cruz at all, but I'll give him credit on that. He comes across balanced when he does these debates, unlike some of the members of the House where it seemed clear that their decision had been made and what they were trying to push, the agenda. He leaves it much more open air, gives everybody a chance to respond. Other members that spoke were not as quite as I think as straightforward as he was. He did put in some cheesy jokes, which are really cringe. But at the same time, his questions were straightforward. He got to the point. He asked a full question. Jackie Rosen, which is the Democrat on the committee with him asking questions, it should be noted, is from Nevada. So you have to wonder if she's gonna support this, because TKO is such a major company in Nevada. Her questions were often a little more long-winded and drifting and not quite as pointed. And then Bernie Moreno from Ohio, you always need one person there in Congress that's going to ask stupid damn questions just to get on the air. And that was him asking if they could bring WrestleMania to Ohio. And then, of course, he had to bring up how his dad or whatever loved Muhammad Ali, pointless shit like that. But overall, it was, I think, the questions were much stronger because they're more direct, especially coming from Ted Cruz. So I give on that. The Senate, it felt much more like a true fact-finding operation, where then in the House of Representatives, that first hearing really felt like the decision has been made, and we are just, we are dressing this up just to pretend we're having a debate, but the decision has been made that this is going to get passed.
How do you think each of the witnesses did?
Well, that was interesting as well. And their opening statements, I think all of them, did very well. I thought in their opening statements, well, first, Tim Shipman of the Athletic Commissions, we can mostly ignore him. I'll probably come back to him later for one thing, but for the most part, he was a non-entity there. He didn't have much to say, not much to add to the debate. But in their opening statements, I thought Oscar De La Hoya was great. I thought Nico Ollie Walsh was great. I thought Nick Khan, of course, is obviously going to be great. Prepared statement. All made strong arguments on behalf of what they support. I thought Nico Walsh did an excellent job pointing out the anti-monopoly nature of the original Ollie Act. I thought Oscar De La Hoya's statement was great about how we're supposed to be here to protect the fighters, and that this bill is being pushed by a company that owns the UFC that has all these issues. So they all made really strong arguments in their opening statements. It's when they got to the questions, you could really see the difference. Now, I'll say Nico Ali Walsh did excellent especially for a fighter. I was surprised at how well prepared and how excellent, how good his responses were. But this is where you really saw the difference between an Oscar De La Hoya and Nick Khan, because Oscar De La Hoya, he did not seem like it was the information, the knowledge on the subject was on the tip of his tongue, was right there in the forefront of his mind, and that he could access it immediately. Where Nick Khan seemed incredibly well versed. He knew exactly what he wanted to say in any situation. Now, it's a possibility that that this could have been, if Ted Cruz and them already support the bill, it is possible that there was some sort of work together between the lobbyists for TKO and the staff of the Senate, so that they knew ahead of time what was going to be asked. But I also think Nick Khan is just that type of guy. He's well versed in the subject. He's well prepared, and so he could answer these very, immediately and satisfactory. Where Oscar kind of went down side paths, didn't fully answered in ways that were vague or honestly, I don't think reinforced the message that he wanted to get across. And one thing I think the problem with Oscar De La Hoya is that because he is defending the status quo, and everybody seems to know that the status quo in boxing is not working right now, it already puts them in the hole. And I think that's the big detriment. But you could really see, that in their opening statements, how good they were, but when they got to the matter being asked questions off the cuff, their answers, they really struggled to answer as effectively as Nick Khan. But thankfully, Nico Ali Walsh was there, because as bad as Oscar, or ineffective, I think, as Oscar was, Nico Ali Walsh was not as good as Nick Khan, but much better than Oscar De La Hoya in defending the I guess I shouldn't say defending the status quo, but attacking this new bill.
Now let's go over some of the subjects that were raised in the questions, and we'll see what you thought of the witnesses' answers and how you would have perhaps answered differently. So first, they talked about the health and safety aspects of the bill. What was the witnesses' response to this? And then how would you have answered?
Well, the witnesses' responses, they had different responses. For the most part, they all agreed health and safety is the key aspect. And there was a moment, I think this is an effective statement, an argument by Nick Khan, but I also think it's incredibly misleading. He brought up that over the last 30 years, I think it's 63 boxers have died within a week of their matches, which shows how dangerous boxing is. And he pointed out UFC, there have been no fatalities. Well, that is true, and that is something UFC could probably be proud of, but there's a couple reasons why that statement might be misleading. One is UFC is a single promoter, right? It's not the sport. When you're talking about 63 fatalities in boxing, you're talking about boxing. There have been fatalities in MMA outside the UFC, and so it's misleading to compare a small sliver of a sport to the entire population of a sport. So that part I didn't agree with. Also, the fact that boxing is just different than MMA. Boxing is inherently more dangerous than mixed martial arts because it's concentrated just on striking, where mixed martial arts has a grappling submission component. So, right there, it's somewhat of an apples to oranges comparison to say, UFC. In fact, it's completely an apples to oranges comparison, because you're saying the UFC, which is a sliver of MMA, which of a sport that has different rule set than boxing, making it less dangerous, has less fatalities. So I thought that was misleading, but it was a strong argument to make to show the safety and protocols that the UFC has put into place. At the same time, I think Oscar made a tremendous mistake talking about how there's these great protections in boxing, almost like we don't need to do anything further in boxing because the protections are there. We're looking out for the fighters all the time. And I think personally, a strong argument would be like, yes, we all want to enhance the protections for the fighters. That's fine. But why do we have to hang on the provision? Why do we have to include a provision that offers UBOs and all these other parts if we're focused on protecting the fighters? Let's pass that portion of the bill. Let's enhance protections for the fighters. But the other portions are, let's not use these protections as a Trojan horse to smuggle in these other parts. But instead, Oscar de la Hoya, I think, again, made a mistake where he defended the current state and basically made the claim that all the fighters are tremendously protected, that the protections are already there. Which in some part is true. The protections that the Ollie Act, not the Ollie Act, but the Boxing Safety Act passed are in place, and they probably have made boxing safer, have done something for the fighters. Doesn't mean that more can't be done, but that's the pitch. If we want to do more, let's do more, but let's not make it look like that boxing is, that the entire sport of boxing has failed just because we want to add additional protections.
What about Nico Ali? Did he have anything to say there?
He did. He talked about he made some good points. He talked about himself, how the protections were there to help him in his case, that when he got injured in a fight, but that didn't really address the point about the point that we couldn't have additional protections. He did, although he did raise more than Oscar de la Hoya, that some of these protections come with the attachments that the TKO wants into the bill. Also is the fact that it was not raised enough, and I wish it was, the pointing out that some of these policies that were put in place as part of this bill to be able to get a TKO, the additional protections, seem to serve as a hurdle, a barrier to creating a UBO. And I am somewhat disappointed no one brought that up. But it is only an hour hearing. That's one issue. And so you can't pick apart everything. But I do think that's something that's been ignored, is that a lot of the benefits that supposedly are offered in this bill, specifically for the UBO, also seem intended to serve as a moat, a barrier to prevent others from creating UBOs.
There was also some discussion about disclosure and transparency, with Nick Khan holding a completely different view from Oscar de la Hoya and Nico Ali Walsh. Who was right?
Well, both were right and both were wrong. It's kind of the weenie answer, but I think it's kind of true. Nick Khan brought up a good point, and his good point was that the original intent for that disclosure rule was based on the way boxing used to operate, where HBO, let's say, is going to have an event. They have a budget. They are going to pay a promoter a set amount for that specific fight. And so the fighter needs to know how much his promoter is getting paid so he can ask for a fair amount of that compensation. Instead, TKO is working on set guaranteed amounts that are coming from, they've contracted with the broadcaster, so it's a set amount annually, there's nothing specific to a specific fight or specific event. And so the disclosure, much of it can be found as a public entity, can be found in their disclosure forms. And all that's true. At the same time, Ollie Walsh and Oscar de la Hoya talked about the importance of having some transparency disclosure, that you would like to know the amounts that your promoter's making, and also have comparisons of what other fighters are and what the percentages you're making. And so, I think Oscar and them, I think in some ways too, Oscar, there seems to be this focus on compensation disclosures. The transparency is the key part of the bill. When that's passed, I think there's more truth to what Nick Khan is saying, even contemporary, because let's take Top Rank when they're on ESPN. Top Rank was given a set amount by ESPN, and so they can almost determine on their own how much would go to each event. And so the boxer really had no ability, even if he could get disclosure, finding out for truly how much their fight was generating. It just didn't work in their favor. Now, that said, there's still benefits to disclosure, and this is the part that kind of got me. One is that if that's the case, why don't we have just more transparent disclosure? Why don't we improve the disclosure process under the Ali Act? Why don't we enhance it so fighters will know exactly the total amount that's being generated by the promotion for this event, either because it's a portion of a guaranteed contract, the gate tickets, all that stuff, as well as how much is going to other fighters, that especially those in a similar position, because then it gives them negotiating leverage to know what their cohorts are making at that level. And so, that's what raised a lot of pay in hockey. NHL has a disclosure rule where all the athletes, all the hockey players know what everybody else is making. And so a player can look at it and say, geez, I'm better than that guy. I deserve a raise. And it has boosted the salaries of hockey players, has worked effectively for them. So that's one argument they can make. The other argument no one brought up is that if Nick Khan, in his defense of saying we don't need disclosure because we're a public entity that discloses everything quarterly, well, okay, then why are you trying to remove the disclosure portion of the bill, right? Why do you want that removed from UBOs? Why do you want UBOs being exempt from having to disclose compensation if it's not necessary? If it doesn't apply fully to the modern world, then that's fine. But why can't you still disclose what you're getting contractually from the broadcasters and the ticket sales and all those other sources of revenue to your fighters? And I think the reason why is if it's a lump sum being paid to the promotion, no fighter can look at that and say, well, I generated an X amount. But if you're on an event as a fighter negotiating and you see that your event, specifically the event you're on, generate X amount of money, you're going to sit there and say, where's my piece of that X amount of money? It's harder to make that claim when have one fight for the organization and you see the entire sum total of revenue generated. So I think that's the reason they don't want that disclosed. Also, they don't want to disclose because it gives more, it creates a larger picture of the total finances of the organization. And finally, one thing they also don't disclose is the fighter pay and the percentage per event. The UFC, as much as we learned from the antitrust suit, no one discloses how much of their revenue is going to the fighters, right? And I think that's the other part of disclosure that's missing here. It's hard for fighters to, as long as they're left questioning how much of the total pie they're getting, they can't make as large of demands. That you won't see the blowback that you would otherwise. But no one brought that up, which always surprises me that no one brings up the fact that, okay, you say the compensation doesn't matter anymore, then why do you want that taken out? Why do you want to remove that protection in the boxers if it doesn't matter anymore? Just let them still get disclosure.
Nick Khan went after sanctioning organizations as well, but Oscar defended them. Whose opinion do you think is closer to the truth?
Well, I thought this was a tremendous mistake by Oscar De La Hoya because no one likes the sanctioning organizations, right? They are their ratings are lower than any politicians. They are like at Vladimir Putin level in the United States. Which is as low as you can go. So no one likes them. And yet he chose to defend them, even though they're somewhat indefensible, because, everybody thinks they're to blame for the problems. And as much as you can, although I give Oscar with this argument, I would rather pay a small fee to a sanctioning organization in order to get a large portion of the revenue than pay no fee to a sanctioning organization and get a small piece of the revenue for an event, which is what he's saying the TKO model is going to be. That may be true, but it looks bad when you have sanctioned organizations that their only function is to take sanction fees. Now, Oscar brought up all the charities and stuff they do, but it's pretty opaque the type of charity work and benefits that these sanctioned organizations do for the boxers. So that's a weak argument, I thought. And I think one of the problems with Oscar, maybe Nico Ali Walsh as well, is they've created this alliance to push back against the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. The Ali Protection Alliance or something like that. And some of the members include the sanctioning organizations. They're some of the most committed to fighting this new bill. Well, that means that because of that, you have to defend the sanctioning organizations when you're there. And they're the one that if it was up to me, I would throw under the bus because they really are hard to defend. And so it gives Nick Khan tons of ammunition to talk about the fact that the sanctioning organizations charge these fees, that they create all these titles that are confusing to the fans. All that is true. But again, Nick Khan is incredibly misleading, but it's, but the vast majority of people watching this either at home or in the Senate are going to miss what he's actually saying because they're not as knowledgeable about the sport. And they're just going to see it and think this sounds true. Like one of his complaints was, I think it's true that the sanctioning organizations have too many titles, but he brought up that under the sanctioning organizations, there are currently, I think, 168 weight champions in 12 weight classes, he said. Well, what's misleading to me about that is it makes it sound like, oh, there's all these world champions out there. But when you total that number up, you're not including just the world championships. You're including the non-world titles. You're including the step-up titles for the. In fact, there's 168 champions. I think it was just for the WBC. I should rephrase that. It was just for the WBC, which sounds even more absurd. People hear, they go, oh, this one organization has 168 world champions, but it's not the world champions. It's their, it's not their interim and world champions are the ones they call world champions. That would include their silver champions, their North American champion, there's the French champion, the Asian and Pacific champion. There's all these regional champions as well. And it might be unfortunate. You might, not like the idea that they charge sanctioning fees for these regional titles. But when people talk about the idea that there's too many champions out there, too many world champions, I don't think anybody thinks that there's too many champions because there's a North American champion, right? That there's a European champion. Regional champions don't cause confusion over who's the real world champion. So that was misleading. The other thing he brought up was, based on a question by Ted Cruz, is, who's the current middleweight champion? And he brought up, Nick Khan, that is, he mentioned that there's no world champion right now because there's the 4 sanctioning organizations creating confusion. And instead, he pointed out how back in the 1980s, Marvin Hagler was the only world champion at the time instead of like today. But that's misleading as well because Marvin Hagler held several belts. Oscar De La Hoya tried to explain how Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearn and other competitors at the time also held titles when they were fighting Marvin Hagler, that there were multiple titles. But Marvin Hagler was viewed as the single middleweight champion for the longest time, even when he didn't hold other belts, because at the time the system was so concentrated for so long that people identified the champion instead of what titles they were holding. And the splinter over a long period of time has now created a situation where each of the sanctioning organizations can carry similar weight. That's a different problem. That's not the same problem that Nick Khan is talking about. And I wish, again, hindsight 2020, I wish someone would have asked or brought up the fact that what they're arguing for with this new bill, according to Nick Khan and TKO, is they're claiming that they're just giving fighters more options, more chances, and that's it. But at the same time, they're making 2 arguments about titles. One is they say they're just giving fighters an option; they can go fight whatever title they want. Well, then in that case, the Zuffa Boxing is just introducing another title into this mix when you already claim there's too many titles. Or the alternative is you're claiming that you want to clean it up and have only one world champion, in which case you're not. The end result is not an option. That means the end result is you want a monopoly over the championships, and no one seems to point that out. No one seems to highlight that fact of the argument, the end result of the argument TKO is making. In fact, Oscar did the opposite, which I think is just an incredible mistake. He kept claiming that a lot of boxers wouldn't want to fight for TKO because they would want to continue fighting for the in the current system. That might be true, but it's not a good argument for why you shouldn't pass the bill if you're saying that the bill is not going to have an effect because most fighters are going to choose to opt out of it. And I think that's a mistake by Oscar. And I also don't think he's accurate there. I think that's wishful thinking on his part.
Do you think Oscar prepared very well, or do you think that he went in there thinking that he already knew and sort of just freewheeled it?
No, I think there was some preparation by Oscar. You could tell he had some points and arguments, but this is not a subject that he has been deeply in the weeds and discussing for a long time, right? Where I am sure Nick Khan has been sitting in rooms going over this for months on end. Ever since they decided to jump in, there's been probably long-winded. He's probably read several reports, deep multi-page decks, sat in committee meetings where they discuss this at length, what the intent and purpose is going to be. And so he probably fully understands not only what the bill does, but the messaging they want. Where Oscar has kind of come on lately, has probably done some research, but it's his understanding of it is not complete. This is stuff he's trying to catch up on, and he's falling back on talking points, his clapback Thursday talking points. So you can see in his written statement something that shows that he has an argument of defense against what the bill is, against this bill, why he's opposing this new amendment. But when he has to answer off the cuff, he falls back in almost his clapback Thursday discussion points, and some of them negate the previous arguments he makes. So I think that's a big part of it. Is not that he hasn't done any research, but he hasn't. But he's done. The research has been so recent, it is not ingrained into his DNA.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!